Persona 5 is one of the great masterpieces of gaming, and it has one of the biggest scumbags in storytelling as well. Yes, our lovable band of thieves go up against a reprehensible teacher who does disgusting and disturbing things to his students and treats the school like his own personal kingdom where he can do whatever he wants. Thankfully, this monster is stopped in the game by our heroes and is brought to justice. However, our heroes only achieve this with the help of their newly formed powers, which cause someone to have a change in attitude and feel like they need to admit all the wrongdoings they have done and confess who they have hurt. Which works out really well for many of the characters in this game that the law has difficulty putting behind bars. But what if Joker and the others never developed powers and couldn't force the villains to confess what they had done? And in this case, specifically Kamoshida. How could they have dealt with him? Would they even be able to without the ability to change his heart? Or would Kamoshida have expelled them like he wanted and continued to abuse the students? All these questions are about to be answered, so let's find out if the Phantom Thieves could have stopped him without, well, becoming the Phantom Thieves. Just a quick FYI, there are going to be spoilers for Persona 5 Royal in this video, so if you want to experience the story without knowing anything for the first time going in, just beat the game in the next 50-ish hours and then come back. Easy, right? So how would Joker and company take down Kamoshida without their powers? I've come up with a few different options that could potentially work, which would charge Kamoshida with differing punishments from just being fired to being put in jail. Now, I'm not by any means a law expert, so if there's anything I've missed or used incorrectly, feel free to share in the comments because these are things people should know about and the information about the law should be used correctly. So let's get this started. The first is to carry out vigilante justice and jump him in an alley and pull a Punisher on him.
Even if it is exactly as you imagine it to be, hypothetically speaking, what can you do? We just received a call from the hospital. Suzui's in a coma, and her chances of recovery are slim. There's no need to hold back. Why not attack me? Oh, you can. But of course you can.
No, please wait. I beg you. Just forgive me.
As satisfying as that may be, we're going to go a more ethical way, and that's by getting proof he's being abusive and bringing it to the police. We know that some of the adults know the truth about Kamoshida and turn a blind eye simply because having a star athlete like him be a teacher props up their school and makes them look good. So instead of telling any of the faculty who may sweep said evidence under the rug, Joker, Ryuji, and An could go straight to the police with this evidence. Now, how do we obtain evidence? It's not like Kamoshida is just going to let them record him during practices or when he tries to have one-on-one time with the female students. What we do know is Kamoshida constantly calls An for inappropriate reasons and makes unwanted advances on her. An could simply use call recording to record all the times Kamoshida has talked to her over the phone about getting together to, well, you know. And Kamoshida is guilty of this because he's done it multiple times. Now, this game does take place in 2016, but call recording was a thing back then. Side note, I can't believe it's almost been 10 years from 2016 and I feel ancient. Now looking into how the police could arrest Kamoshida, the calls need to meet certain qualifications, so let's see if they do. Firstly, the calls must be considered inappropriate, meaning they are likely harassing, threatening, or otherwise causing distress to the recipient. And with the way An reacts to the attention Kamoshida gives her and that she verbally expresses it to not just him, but to Joker when she tells him what's going on, it's made very clear that this is indeed causing her distress. And not only that, Kamoshida tells An how maybe he'd use Shiho, who is An's friend, instead, which is threatening to Shiho. And with the number of times Kamoshida calls An or talks to her in person, this would definitely constitute as harassment. As for are these encounters deemed inappropriate? Obviously they are. So that all checks out. Secondly, there needs to be repeated contact. Usually a single call wouldn't be enough for an arrest. There needs to be a pattern of repeated calls. Like I just mentioned, we did go over there have been multiple calls made by Kamoshida to An repeatedly, so this checks out as well. Thirdly, the person receiving the calls must report them to the police, providing details about the content and frequency of the calls, which we would have On do in this scenario, and she would have all she needs on her phone from the calls she has recorded. And fourth, for evidence collection, police may ask the victim to keep a record of the calls, including timestamps and call details, which can serve as evidence. Again, On would have all of this as evidence on her phone to show the police. Now with all this evidence On can bring and back up, what kind of charges would Kamoshida be looking at? As Persona 5 does take place in Japan, we would be going by their laws, which would differ from where I live, in Maple Syrup Land. Again, I'm obviously looking up this information. If anybody is actually from Japan or knows Japanese law, feel free to comment about it because I may get some stuff wrong here. The potential charges that could be given are the following. Criminal harassment. This is the most common charge for repeated unwanted communication causing fear or distress. However, in Japan it does not have a specific harassment law and can fall under multiple cases. Some which should apply here are intimidation, assault, and injury. Then there's stalking. If the calls are accompanied by other concerning behaviors like following or watching the victim, it could escalate to stalking charges. Kamoshida would either have to spend 1 year in jail or a fine up to 1 million yen. The other charge could be indecent communication, if the calls involve sexually explicit or offensive content. Now, these charges may not put Kamoshida behind bars forever, but they would definitely get him fired from teaching and stop him from ever becoming a teacher again. You see, schools in Japan require teachers to have a clean criminal record, and if Kamoshida were to get charged for any of these, he would have to leave the school and wouldn't be hired by any other school again. But remember, this is just based primarily off the phone calls On would receive. If they could prove some of the other atrocities Kamoshida has committed, the charges would be much worse. So let's dive a bit deeper. Now, after covering phone calls, we could get video evidence of Kamoshida being a giant asshat. We see that he has no qualms about hurting students even if there are other people present. Now, in this case with this particular scene, it would be hard to prove ill intent on Kamoshida's part here. He could easily just say this was a freak accident and not much could be done. So recording him during practice may not actually accomplish anything, sadly. Even though we know many, if not all of the volleyball team knows how terrible Kamoshida is, they also refuse to report what's been going on in fear of what may happen to them. And we see this in the story as they don't willingly cooperate with Joker and Ryuji when pressed about Kamoshida. However, we know Kamoshida does even worse stuff when off the clock privately with students, which causes them severe mental and physical harm. Ryuji and Joker could follow On or any of the girls Kamoshida has an interest in and film what's going on with them instead of trying to prove his abusive behavior during practices, as he tries to push himself onto those students. Obviously, at a certain point, they could also step in, stopping what's about to happen, and then take the video evidence to the police. Assuming he does make physical unwanted contact or says something very damning. This could be just before he abuses Shiho, or On could agree to meet up with Kamoshida and tell him that she's not interested in him, and that way Joker and Ryuji could see how he reacts. Again, obviously stepping in if things get out of hand. If Kamoshida was caught in the act of trying to force himself on someone, those charges would be much worse than phone calls. He could be charged for attempted, which would result in a jail sentence for up to 10 years. And remember, it would be attempted in this case as Joker and Ryuji would definitely stop Kamoshida before Shiho gets hurt. Or if On were to meet up with him, it would result in the same charge. So obviously, this charge is much worse for Kamoshida, and he would definitely be out of a job and get some appropriate jail time for what he's done. And at the same time, save Shiho from a horrible experience. Now for another instance that could take Kamoshida down, it involves another student from the school and a major character in Persona 5, Makoto Nijima. She's the student council president and does have a strong moral nature to do what is right. She does care how her peers are doing and does everything she can to make school life enjoyable for the student body, despite what some of the faculty may be saying to her. If Joker, Ryuji, and On could actually speak with her and explain what's going on, she would take this seriously and go through the proper channels to have something done. She definitely has enough pull in her school system to accomplish this, and is well regarded because of her high marks in extracurricular activities, and is a top student at Shujin Academy. Now, the principal may very well tell her that everything is fine and that Joker and Ryuji are just delinquents and not to be taken seriously. This would be to save face not just for himself, but for the school. She may ask for any physical evidence they can use or get student statements. So let's say at the very least On had those phone recordings we talked about earlier. She could take it upon herself to make sure justice is brought to Kamoshida, and that his victims can remain safe from him. If this process did go on for long enough when gaining said evidence, time could elapse to the point when Shiho gets severely hurt from what happens following Kamoshida's abuse to her. This could cause Makoto to go over the edge, as An will have told her what happened and why they couldn't stop him sooner. Now that she has some form of evidence and statements from An and Ryuji about what Kamoshida has done to them, and An could link what happened to Shiho to Kamoshida, she could use her biggest ace in the hole, which is her older sister Sai Nijima, who is a public prosecutor. She could tell her sister what's been going on at the school and have her sister either directly or indirectly help them with making a case against Kamoshida. With Sai's legal know-how and the evidence and statements she could get from students, she could easily take Kamoshida to court and have him ejected from the school and get time behind bars for what he's done. Now, getting statements from all the students was tricky in the story, as everybody was scared of what Kamoshida might do to them if he found out what they were telling people about him, which is something that happens in real life. However, Joker, Ryuji, and An are all just students like them, which does lead them to believe that the three of them can't do anything to take down Kamoshida, since he's an adult with all this power over them. If you include Sai into this mix now, and she is the one asking about Kamoshida and getting statements from the students to use against him in a court of law, they may be more willing to cooperate because they could actually see that they now have a chance to bring him down with Sai's help. With all the students giving her information, whether about his advances or abuse to them, Sai could definitely structure enough of a solid case to take Kamoshida down, and as Shiho recovers, she could ask her about what happened as well. And Sai would be willing to help. She wouldn't just ignore something this important from her sister, especially if she now knows her sister could be in potential danger because of Kamoshida just being around her. Even if she was busy with something else, she could still have someone else she knows help them with this, who could be on the same level as her, and I'm sure she knows enough people in her workplace to do so. Maybe she could send the case over to another video game prosecutor we're all pretty familiar with. So that substitute could help Makoto and the others with this. Sai could also pressure the principal into not expelling Joker and Ryuji until the case against Kamoshida has been carved in stone, which would at least stop Kamoshida's reign of just expelling whoever the hell he wants until the matter is settled. Now that things have sadly escalated with Kamoshida again, Sai could bury him for what he's done, not just with the previous charges we've mentioned, but with what he's done to Shiho now. The charge would be non-consensual intercourse, which could lead to imprisonment from anywhere between 2 to 15 years. This is also on top of the harassment and other physical abuse he's done to the other students as well. And they could carry Kamoshida off kicking and screaming like the pathetic he is to prison. There are a number of ways for Joker and the others to defeat Kamoshida and put an end to his nightmare at the school. It would definitely be a much longer process than what they did in the actual story, but it would still end up resulting in Kamoshida losing his job and being dragged through the mud like the loser he is. Honestly, with who the Phantom Thieves are as people, regardless of not having powers, they aren't the type who would just turn a blind eye to a person in need. The main team definitely could put Kamoshida away without having to change of heart him. They are smart and resourceful enough to do so. And with the terrible things Kamoshida puts these kids through, he's going away for a long time, and his career is going to be left in shambles, which is what this monster deserves. The Phantom Thieves have access to the evidence they need, and do have people and connections they are unaware of at the time at the beginning of the game that would help them with putting Kamoshida behind bars. But how do you guys think they could beat Kamoshida without becoming the Phantom Thieves? Is there a plan you guys can come up with that I missed? Or do you think regardless of what evidence they bring forward or who helps them, Kamoshida could find a loophole in the legal system and get off scot-free? Let me know. As for Persona 5, this game will continue to impress me with how great its main cast of characters are. They are truly heroes with or without the mask, and definitely stole all our hearts on this journey. Thanks again for watching. This was me, just nathing out. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope you found it interesting. If you want to check out more Persona videos, I've got more on the channel to watch. I hope I made your day a little less boring, and I'll hopefully see you at the next video.